Welcome back to the deep dive, and a massive welcome to you, the learner. We know you tune in because, well, you want to understand not just what is happening in the world, but the hidden mechanics of why it's happening.
Right? Digging into the actual why.
Exactly. And today we are aiming that curiosity squarely at your own career because, usually when we talk about navigating a professional life or like chasing down a massive ambition, there is this incredibly pervasive expectation that you'll just be handed a clean map.
Oh, yeah. Like a GPS for your life. You punch in your destination, say VP of marketing or a successful founder, and the route just highlights in bright blue, and a calm voice tells you exactly when to turn.
Right. Take the next exit for your promotion, then merge seamlessly onto the executive fast track. It's so linear. And honestly, it is deeply comforting to believe in. We all want to think success is just a matter of cleanly navigating a predetermined path.
But the reality is that the moment you actually step into the professional arena,
Eh.
you immediately lose that GPS signal.
It just drops.
It completely drops. You are suddenly neck deep in the messy, unstructured reality of office politics, cognitive burnout, and, very public failures. You're looking at a professional landscape that is entirely unmarked territory.
Which is exactly why today's deep dive is going to be so vital for you. We have essentially been handed a linguistic roadmap. We're unpacking this fascinating, highly curated collection of 50 English idioms, phrases, and pieces of corporate jargon.
Yeah, and we aren't just going to rattle off a vocabulary list here.
No, definitely not. We're going to use these specific phrases to chart the entire life cycle of ambition.
Because language doesn't just passively describe our work life. The idioms we naturally reach for actually reveal the hidden psychology of how we survive it. We are going to trace the arc from the grueling, heavy-lifting friction of just starting out, through the immense mental exhaustion of the middle, all the way to the contradictory complexities of being a leader.
So let's start right at the absolute beginning of that journey, the starting line. There is a stark contrast between two specific phrases in our source material that captures the psychological split of early ambition perfectly.
It really does.
On one hand, you have this naive, almost Hollywood hope that an amazing opportunity will just, fall on your lap. Like, success will simply recognize your hidden genius and come looking for you without any effort on your part.
Right, the dream.
But the visceral truth of early ambition is the exact opposite. You have to claw your way here.
The physicality of those two phrases is what makes them so revealing, I think. Think about the physical posture of something falling on your lap. You are sitting down, you are stationary, basically just waiting for gravity to do the work for you.
Yeah, an entirely passive locus of control.
Exactly. But to claw your way here implies a vertical, desperate, and often highly precarious climb. It acknowledges that gravity is actually working against you. Overcoming those initial massive barriers to entry requires an almost animalistic level of grit.
It's a completely different mindset. Because you don't start at the top, right? You start by picking up a freelance gig. You take a small, maybe temporary chunk of work just to get a foot in the door.
Just to prove yourself.
Right, and you're doing it simply to earn an honest day's work. It's about laying the foundation brick by brick. You have to prove that you can execute the raw labor with integrity before anyone trusts you with the big stuff.
And that initial phase is incredibly vulnerable. You are constantly being evaluated by people who have vastly more power than you.
Yeah.
Which introduces a really painful psychological reality, the experience of people writing me off.
Oh, yeah. That hurts.
It does. When you are the youngest in the room, or you have the thinnest resume, the establishment tends to casually dismiss you. They look at you and calculate that you simply aren't important enough to factor into their equations.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because getting written off stings. It's a huge blow to the ego. But you can't just sit there and nurse your grievances, right? The psychological pivot required here is to take agency.
Yes, absolutely.
But what does taking agency actually look like in a real office environment?
To take agency means you completely abandon the mindset of waiting for a permission slip. You stop waiting for a manager to explicitly assign you a task or validate your existence.
You just go for it.
Right. You exert your own initiative to organize the chaos around you. It is a fundamental psychological shift from being an object, something that things happen, to becoming the subject, the person who makes things happen.
Let me push back on that a little bit, though. Is taking agency just about showing enthusiasm? Like, if I walk into a room full of senior people who have already written me off and I say, hey, I've never built a financial model before, but I'm ready to have a shout at this, meaning I want to take a swing at it, is that vocalized enthusiasm enough to actually change their minds?
That's a crucial distinction to make, actually. Saying you want to have a shout at something is just the willingness to try. It's necessary, but it is absolutely not sufficient on its own. The willingness to try must be immediately coupled with the phrase, get after. You can't just cheerfully volunteer and then wait for instructions. You have to actively, aggressively get after that project.
Ah, right.
Getting after something means killing your own procrastination, hunting down the information yourself, and attacking the work with absolute relentless drive.
So it's the difference between raising your hand and actually sprinting toward the problem.
Precisely.
Okay, so you've taken agency, you are getting after it, you are finally building some momentum, but the moment you start moving fast, you inevitably slam face first into the organizational wall. You transition from the friction of your own inexperience to the systemic resistance of the company itself.
The gauntlet of bureaucracy. This is where individual drive meets corporate physics.
Right. Because you instantly hit the red tape, all those rigid bureaucratic rules, the endless compliance checks, the forms in triplicate that actively prevent you from innovating quickly.
Or worse, you run into a literal censorship agency.
Oh man, yes. And we aren't talking about a state-run media censor here. Every single company has a department. Maybe it's legal, maybe it's a hyper-cautious brand team, or just a micromanaging boss that seemingly exists solely to heavily edit, water down, or reject your ideas.
And the immediate consequence of slamming into that censorship agency is that your momentum completely evaporates. Your project is suddenly held up in the status.
Just stuck.
Stuck in administrative purgatory. Based on what you just described, this is the exact moment an idea begins to die.
It is the absolute recipe for a dud project. I mean, if you allow legal or the brand team to drag it out, deliberately prolonging the review process for months on end, your brilliant, timely initiative turns into a total failure. A dud, a firework that just fizzles out on the lawn.
Exactly.
So practically speaking, how do you survive this phase without losing your mind?
Well, the tactical solution here from our sources is to grease the skids.
No, wait. I hear greasing the skids, and it instantly sounds a bit manipulative to me. It sounds like whispering in corners, playing dirty office politics, or buying people drinks to bypass the rules.
I can see why it sounds that way, but it's actually about operational empathy. To grease the skids means doing the unseen, preemptive relationship building before you ever launch your project.
How so?
If you know the legal department is going to be a censorship agency, you don't wait for them to block you. You take the lead lawyer to coffee 3 weeks early. You ask for their advice before the idea is fully baked. You are systematically removing the friction before the friction has a chance to stop you. It's not manipulation. It's anticipating resistance and smoothing the track.
That makes a lot of sense, actually, and it perfectly aligns with a concept from the gaming world that completely recontextualized this for me, the concept of key binding.
Oh, I love this analogy.
Right. In a complex video game, you might have to open 3 different menus just to heal your character. But if you customize your key bindings, you map that entire sequence to a single button, like the F key. It removes the friction between your intention and the action. Isn't surviving office bureaucracy essentially just setting up excellent organizational key bindings? You customize your relationships and your mental shortcuts so your workflow is real dialed in.
That is a brilliant analogy. Because if we translate key binding from a computer to a corporate ecosystem, setting up a shortcut means learning how to effectively delegate.
Yeah.
A dialed-in workflow means you aren't opening 3 menus or doing 3 people's jobs yourself.
Yeah.
You know exactly which tasks to seamlessly map to which specific team members.
Yeah.
And conversely, you want to position yourself as the ultimate shortcut for other people. You want to become the go-to person.
Human easy button.
Exactly. When the legacy database crashes at 4 p.m. on a Friday, no executive wants to read a 200-page manual. They want to press the Sarah button because Sarah is the go-to person. She's the universally recognized solver of that specific problem. Becoming the go-to person makes you entirely indispensable within a system that is otherwise choked by red tape.
But here's the massive hidden cost of all this. Greasing the skids, anticipating friction, constantly dialing in your workflow, being the go-to person who solves everyone else's emergencies. All of that creates incredible external efficiency for the company.
But an internal nightmare.
Right. It takes a devastating internal toll on you.
Which brings us to the cognitive bandwidth required to sustain this. Human thinking is often quantified here as brain cycles.
It's a phrase directly borrowed from computer science, referring to the processing power of a CPU and applying it to human cognition. It treats your mental energy as a strictly finite resource. You only wake up with so many brain cycles to spend. And certain tasks are incredibly expensive to run. For instance, the phrase add fractions. If I ask you to add 1/2 and 1/3, you can't just mash the numbers together. You have to expend mental energy to find a common denominator first.
Which is exhausting.
It is. In the workplace, when you are constantly code switching, jumping from a highly creative brainstorming session directly into a grueling budget review, you're constantly having to find a new common denominator, and that absolutely zaps your brain.
Zaps your brain is such a visceral descriptor. It implies a literal, painful electrical shock to your nervous system. That intense cognitive context switching leaves you in a state of profound mental depletion. You aren't just tired. Your processing power is fundamentally compromised.
And the brutal part is you can't just hit pause. This leads to a surprisingly philosophical phrase from the text, not a brain in a vat.
Which is a classic philosophical thought experiment. The idea that reality is an illusion, and you might just be a disembodied brain hooked up to a supercomputer simulating your life.
But this phrase asserts the exact opposite. I am not a brain in a vat, meaning we live in a tangible, unforgiving, physical reality. We are governed by linear time. And because we can't just pause the simulation to catch our breath when our brain cycles are zapped, real-world deadlines will inevitably sneak up on you.
They absolutely will.
The Friday deliverable doesn't care that your processing power is low. It approaches silently. And if you aren't managing your energy, it will completely ambush you.
So the critical question becomes, how do you manage that cognitive depletion? How do you protect your brain cycles? The language provides two fascinating remedies. First, the absolute necessity of ventilation.
Like opening a window.
Well, it can be literal fresh air, yes, but metaphorically, it refers to the psychological necessity of airing out stagnant ideas. When a team is stuck and their brain cycles are zapped, you need cognitive ventilation.
Got it.
You need to step away, change the environment, and allow a free exchange of completely unrelated thoughts to clear the room. And equally important is knowing exactly when to cork a situation.
Like aggressively shoving a stopper into a bottle of wine.
Exactly. Sometimes the most strategic, high-level maneuver you can execute is to firmly cork a stressful, looping debate. You just have to say, we are done talking about this today, put a stopper in it, and stop letting it drain your remaining processing power.
So, you've clawed your way up, you've greased the skids to bypass the censorship agencies, you've fiercely protected your brain cycles by corking the bad debates. And now, you finally ship your work. The project goes live.
The scary part.
Oh, yeah. Because the second it leaves your hands, it enters an entirely new ecosystem. It is now at the mercy of the court of public opinion.
Where the world finally gets to judge the reality of what you've built.
And the language used here perfectly captures the physics of momentum. Huge successes almost never start with an avalanche. Usually the first few pieces of data or early customer feedback just trickle into the system.
It's incredibly slow at first.
It's sparse, it makes you sweat. But then, if the work is genuinely good, that trickle builds into a natural swell.
A natural swell. Think of the smooth, undeniable rising of an ocean wave far out at sea, or the string section of an orchestra slowly building to a climax. It's organic, unforced momentum.
Yes. And that natural swell helps your project accelerate. The speed of adoption continuously increases, and suddenly you realize you have real market traction. The tires have gripped the pavement, and you are being propelled forward with actual force.
This is where we see the absolute intoxicating highs of professional life. When you have traction, you start generating buzz, that feverish, highly contagious heat of public discussion.
It's the best feeling.
It really is. And if the buzz sustains itself, you might even build a true fandom, a dedicated subculture of people who don't just use your product, but make it part of their identity. You're getting a rave review from the toughest industry critics.
Even if, as is often hilariously true, the absolute best parts of your work happen to already be in a trailer. Like, you gave away all the best punchlines or the coolest features in the marketing pitch, but the rave reviews are still rolling in anyway. At this peak, you are held up as the gold standard. You are the model of innovation that every other company is frantically pointing to.
It is the absolute pinnacle of the ambition life cycle. It feels incredible.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Because gravity always comes back. What if you don't get the rave review? What if the reality check bounces? What if your highly anticipated project is, to use a very heavy word from the text, An atrocity.
An atrocity. A
Yeah.
spectacularly terrible, horrifyingly ill-conceived final product.
Right. What if you get to the final round interview for the job of your dreams, you completely freeze on the easiest question, and you walk out to your car realizing, I have totally blown it.
The fascinating thing about blowing it is how the market actually responds. It is rarely a dramatic, screaming explosion. Instead, the language highlights a highly specific, painfully relatable phenomenon, the slight slapping across the face.
Ouch. Why does a slight slap somehow feel worse than a punch?
Because a punch is an attack. A slight slap is a correction. It represents a polite yet incredibly direct humiliation.
Oh, that makes total sense.
It is the lukewarm sales figures arriving the morning after your team pops champagne over a wildly optimistic forecast. It's the room going completely silent after you pitch an idea, and a senior partner just saying, well, it's certainly a direction. It wakes you up, it deeply stings your pride, and it forces you to instantly face a reality you were trying to ignore.
So how do you ensure you avoid the slap?
The defense mechanism is twofold. First, ensure your work never contains an egregious error, a mistake so glaring, lazy, and terrible that it simply cannot be ignored or excused. And second, make absolutely sure your presentation isn't pretentious.
Ah, using $50 words to explain a $5 concept. Trying to artificially elevate your work just to sound smarter than everyone else in the room.
Exactly, because the court of public opinion might forgive a boring project, but it has absolutely zero tolerance for the pretentious or the egregious. That is what invites the slap.
Okay, so surviving these massive emotional swings, the intoxicating highs of being held up as a model, and the stinging, ego-crushing lows of the slight slap across the face that fundamentally changes a person's psychology. Which brings us to our final destination on this map, the evolving leader.
The choices, the weight, and the contradictions of actually being in charge of the system.
Because when you reach this level, you aren't just executing tasks anymore. You are constantly stretching my leadership. You are pushing the outer boundaries of what you are emotionally and operationally capable of managing. You are riding the wave with the team growing. It's no longer just about your personal momentum. You are trying to balance and surf this massive, volatile, collective energy.
But leadership is fraught with highly consequential traps. And the most dangerous trap is when you have handcuffed yourself.
Walk me through what that actually looks like.
Handcuffing yourself is a failure of foresight. It's when a leader signs a rigid, unbreakable 5-year contract for a technology stack that is already becoming obsolete. Or it's locking your team into a highly specific strategy that leaves no room for pivoting.
Right.
You willingly surrender your own freedom of movement. You have shackled your team's potential to a bad decision.
So, as a leader, how do you make the right choices to avoid those handcuffs? Is it just a no-brainer, an obvious zero-friction decision to consolidate all the company's resources and focus on your own pet project? You know, that one specific initiative or side hustle that you personally love and desperately want to see succeed?
It's incredibly tempting to use your power that way. But synthesizing the final phrases in our roadmap reveals a much more nuanced truth. As a leader, you and your core team can absolutely be the primary purveyors of incredible ideas. You can be the engine supplying the market with innovation. You can operate with demonic speed and focus.
I have to say, demonic speed is such a dark, intense way to describe productivity.
It is dark because it implies an obsessive, relentless, almost terrifying determination to bend reality to your will. And a lot of successful leaders possess that demonic drive.
Sure.
But here is the critical pivot. Ultimate success never happens in a vacuum. A mature leader eventually realizes that despite all their demonic speed and sheer willpower, they are entirely fundamentally dependent on the good grace of others.
Wow. So acknowledging that you only succeed through the generosity, the forgiveness, and the voluntary buy-in of your team and your peers.
Precisely. You only cross the finish line because other people actively allowed you to.
Right.
Therefore, a true leader doesn't create a flap, a chaotic panic, a temper tantrum, or unnecessary drama over a simple misunderstanding.
They stay grounded.
Right. They absorb the anxiety rather than radiating it. Because at the end of the day, they recognize the profound privilege of their position. Being invited to lead and being given the space to stretch your leadership is not a right. It is a rare honor.
What an unbelievable journey. I mean, think about the ground we just covered. We took a simple collection of everyday idioms and we used them to trace the entire messy arc of a career. We started out in the dirt, clawing our way up from the bottom against gravity, just trying to pick up gigs. We learned the operational empathy required to grease the skids and slip past the censorship agencies.
The red tape?
Yeah, the red tape. We confronted the very real biological limits of our own brain cycles and learned how to cork a draining situation.
We weathered the intoxicating natural swells of public buzz, and we learned how to survive the polite humiliation of the slight slappings across the face when we inevitably blown it.
And finally, we arrived at a mature place of leadership, learning to balance our demonic drive with a deep reliance on the good grace of others. It is genuinely amazing how these casual phrases map so perfectly onto the daily psychology of our struggle.
Mm.
They aren't just words we use at work, they were the actual emotional terrain we are walking on.
They don't just describe the map, they are the map.
Which brings me to one final provocative thought for you, the learner, to chew on as we wrap up. Let's build on that profound philosophical idea we touched on earlier, the brain in a vat.
Okay, I like where this is going.
If we agree that we are not just isolated brains floating in a simulation and that we are actually out here interacting with a tangible reality, then the language we choose to use every single day is incredibly powerful. The idioms you select don't just passively describe your work, they actively construct the reality of your work.
The frame dictates the picture.
Exactly. If you choose to look at systemic friction in your office and call it an impenetrable censorship agency, you immediately cast yourself as the powerless victim of a bureaucracy. But if you call that exact same friction an opportunity to grease the skids, you instantly make yourself an active, strategic agent of change.
That changes everything.
It literally alters your professional reality based entirely on the words you use to define it. So as you look at your own professional roadmap tomorrow morning, which phrase are you going to use to define your reality?